All right. Anyone want to hop in and speak? Sure, Tom.
Yeah, I came down to spend some time with my family this week, and my brother-in-law died while I was here.
Oh my.
And so it's been a particularly challenging week for me. And something that you said earlier on during the meditation, actually, not during your talk, although I liked your talk a lot. You talked about restlessness.
Mm,
And when I tried to meditate this week, and even now, I see my foot going down there a mile a minute.
mm.
Um, and I just sometimes when I try to meditate, I'm so restless that at the end of 20 minutes, I feel like I may have gotten 2 minutes in of something that felt kind of meaningful. And I just don't know what to do with that.
With that restlessness. So is
Yeah.
this restlessness this week since your brother-in-law died, or is this a kind of a constant in your meditation? That wasn't clear from what you said, what you're talking.
Well, I think it brought up the fact that that restlessness is always there. It's particularly profound this week.
Particularly profound this week. So that's helpful. I mean, I think it's related to how your body is managing the emotions that must be present for this occasion. And so I mean, this is true in general about energy, whether you're restless for any reason. So one of the ways that I conceive of that, it's almost like there's not enough room in the body for the amount of energy that it has, and that produces like this restlessness. So a simple kind of technique is to feel the space around your body and set aside any thought you have that you can't do that because you think that your nerve endings end at the skin. I mean, in a sense they do, but nonetheless, there's an actual experience if you can interiorly kind of feel as if your body is about an inch or two bigger than that skin limit. You and do that as you do kind of a body scan. It creates just a sense of a bigger container. And sometimes that makes it easier to sit with all that energy. You could ask a question, and this might be particularly helpful this week. Um, what would I be feeling if I really settled right now? I really allowed myself to settle my this this unsettled energy. Just to drop that in. You don't have to answer it because it's not meant to make you think intellectually about it. It's just to point the attention at the restlessness itself. There's an energy in it, which is, you could say, emotion, but is emotion in a kind of an un, unformed state. It doesn't have a form, and it isn't moving very well through the body. So that's where they're trying to create a bigger container feeling can be helpful with restlessness. And I must say, restlessness can be quite uncomfortable. Um, but inquiry can be helpful just to kind of cut through a little bit. Like, what what would this be if it's settled? What would I actually feel here? Because sometimes restlessness, and this is true, I think, of all different kinds of anxiety. Anxiety takes lots of different forms. But I've found through my own practice that I tend to get anxious when I'm avoiding grief. That's I've just found that personally to be true. It's my own body's way of like not feeling something. And having learned that, I'm kind of open to just kind of feeling into potentially the sadness that is right beneath that anxious energy that, it operates sort of like I think my analogy is like in many houses, they put this frosted glass on the windows in the bathroom so that nobody can see in, so you don't have to pull the shade to have privacy. And it just takes the light and it scrambles it so that you can't see the shape that's in that room. And so there's something too in our in our emotional body, if I can use that, that will sometimes believe we can't handle a feeling and it will scramble it. It will, and you'll still feel something. You'll feel this discomfort. You'll feel like not really being able to settle in your body. And so that can be like that frosted glass. You can't know what it is you're feeling, but there's something there. Sometimes, it takes a long time to get through that restlessness. I know this from doing intensive silent meditation retreats. Sometimes it seems like there's a whole lot that happens. Life flies at us really fast, and there's a whole lot happens that we don't really fully experience. We just kind of shelve it as it's happening. We just kind of shelve a lot of stuff we don't feel like we have time to deal with. And then in the space of an intensive silent retreat where you have nothing to distract you and you're meditating all day, you find that this stuff starts to come up, to be felt, to be known, to be recognized. And you have to kind of go through a certain amount of just seeing what's in there, what's in your storage closet. And sometimes we have big storage closets of kind of unfelt, unrecognized sorts of things. So I'm saying this all, not knowing you well, Tom, and just kind of giving you an overall kind of picture of my sense of restlessness as a state. And that, letting the feelings catch up with you can be the thing that needs to happen in the restless state. And that can sometimes mean looking at the resistance we have to doing that. I found that grieving isn't hard at all, but resisting grieving really is hard. When that kind of resistance goes in, like I'm not supposed to feel this in this situation with these people, or I don't want to seem vulnerable. I don't want, there's this kind of thing going on. The actual kind of grief can feel like a relief, can feel like, letting go. But, we try to control things all the time. And we have these ideas of how we're supposed to behave. We're deeply conditioned with these ideas of how we're supposed to behave socially. And then we're doing that. And then we also are sometimes deeply conditioned that our feelings are dangerous and we should stay away from them. Or they make other people uncomfortable who also haven't dealt with their feelings. So if you have one openly and they're not comfortable with them, you'll get these strange vibes. And so we kind of learn gradually to adopt in this sort of semi-shut down way we call adulthood, where we're not fully feeling everything. So hopefully something I said was helpful. Again, I'm just kind of shooting from the hip about restlessness in general, not your situation in particular. The fact that you feel more restless this week would kind of inclined me to give kind of the emotion talk about restlessness, that that's was just the clue that I had that that might be what's going on.
Well, I think this is spot on. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for asking the question. It allowed me to say a lot. So let's see. Stephen.
Hi.
Hi.
I had a few moments of clarity this past week. I was I was reacting to something. I don't remember what the issue was, and it's probably not important, but shortly after I reacted, I noticed that the theme behind the reaction was judging in terms of good and bad, in terms of right and wrong.
Mhm.
And it was interesting to see that clarity about what was behind that reaction. And I felt joy because of that. And I felt joy ever since. Uh, I'm embellishing.
Yeah. No, I know it's not like you've been living in utter bliss, but there is joy to seeing things in a not diluted way. There's it's a quiet joy, it's not necessarily an overwhelming joy, but yes, there is joy, and it's liberating. It's the joy of liberation in some way, if you can see where you've gotten snagged. And
I
goodness,
recognize
there are
that.
no judgments of good and bad and right and wrong snag us so
Yeah,
often. Yeah, the belief that we're right and that it matters that we're right. you know, yeah.
one thing that was part of the clarity was um, noticing that the reaction was a delusion, and that it really made me wonder whether all reactions are delusions.
Mm, yeah.
And so it gave me a little bit of an extra motivation to watch and listen
Yeah.
and reference that experience.
Mhm. Yeah. Stay with that question. I like that question. See if your reactions all have a delusion in them.
Yep. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Mute you. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Doug.
Yeah, I was wanting to leave space for other people to speak, but I've spoken a couple times. But um, so one thing I encounter as I do the body scan, which I've done many times, is uh, often parts have there's like nothing there.
Yes.
It's disconcerting, and I sit with it, and if I kind of say, okay, I'm going to feel the nothingness, that seems to help or seems to
Yeah.
work, so to speak.
Yeah.
And there's always this thing about trying to get somewhere and where am I going? And so that's one thing that's been kind of coming up. And I don't, maybe you could say something about being with that kind of vague sense of unease when there's nothing there, it seems, although I know there's stuff there.
Right. What do I have an
Uh,
arm? Yeah.
yes, or a middle back or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You know. And yeah, and still the mindful piece of like trying to find that place where I'm not beating myself up or not ignoring. And it's again wanting to get somewhere and knowing spiritually that there's nowhere to go, and yet wanting to get there anyway. So,
Right. Yeah. So what can I say with regard to missing body parts? Um, First of all, it's not unusual. You have company, and the first kind of thing to notice is the relationship that the mind is taking to that, you know. And I sensed in your report that you're on this a little bit, but you see how there's an assumption that you should be feeling something there. There's perhaps a little bit of you said disconcerting feeling. Sometimes my word is there's something in you that's a little insulted that you're not getting the experience you think you're supposed to have, you know? Yeah. And so that's really fruitful just to notice that kind of like ego level of this, which is the mind looking for the experience it's told it's supposed to have or it thinks it's supposed to have, and worrying about whether you're doing it right or you've got experience that you're meant to have and so forth. And so it becomes the occasion of a certain kind of self-knowledge when something like this comes up and it's not exactly what you think it should be. So what do you do? Just in terms of what you do, put your attention there anyway, in the nothing, and wait. Maybe some sensation will begin. Maybe it won't. But you don't actually have to make anything of it. I'm trying to think of what would be helpful to say. Trust. Trust the process. Trust the practice, that it will lead you deeper without necessarily knowing what deeper looks like in terms of just the body scan, for example. It's helpful not to exactly know what that will look like. Have you ever done a really long one? Like in a
yeah.
whole hour? Yeah, okay. So you know that.
Well, I've done it that way. There's a racer exercise in the Finder's course, which was very difficult for me. It's where you pay attention to the skin and you go one block at a time, 1 inch at a time around your whole body. And wow, that was hard.
Oh, yeah. All right.
And but usually with body scans, I kind of pay attention to where there's tension or holding or something.
Yeah.
That's I do a lot of that. So
You know, and you're differentiating the mind as you do this. It's like, you know, the brain is very plastic. And so if you actually start paying attention to bodily sensations, your mind's going to see stuff. It's going to probably see more. It's going to get more differentiated. But it's not really your job to make that happen. And that's where it's not helpful to kind of be ahead of yourself. The whole interoceptive sense, the more that you spend time in the bodily sensations, then the brain, literally the brain, begins to see more in that. It's very much like, you know, years ago when I was in graduate school, I did painting classes, and it ended up being the perfect antidote to all this reading that I was doing, was to go and just see color and to try to paint. And over the course of doing that, I noticed that I saw colors with so much more differentiation. I could look at a mud puddle and see lots of different colors in that mud puddle and imagine how I would try to paint that if I was going to paint it. Whereas before, I'd look at a mud puddle and I'd see brown, you know. And so it's true as well of the body. There is a kind of deepening of that, but it's not something that happens because you're trying to make it happen. it really happens on its own.
Sounds good.
Okay,
Sounds
Doug,
that's right. Thank you.
you're welcome. Oh, Allison? Yes.
I wasn't really sure. I messaged you earlier. There's a lot going on. I wasn't really sure quite what I might want to bring to class or if I could, but I was resonating a lot when you're talking about, I've been noticing, besides sometimes wanting to shut the chatter on, it's the sense of wanting to, you talk about the non-self, to disappear, to actually sort of, can I get really outside the self, but also life. So there was this thing about, I was thinking a lot because I have to make some major decisions, and I messed up again, I feel, in this process where I have this pattern, I think, where I am confused. I seek help, support, advice sometimes, which I do want, information, perspective, but then sometimes lose my own. So I give up my power. And some of that is in there's a fear arises about timing, or I have to make a decision, and I'm going to lose this opportunity. And sometimes I forget the lessons that I feel I should know by now. I forget. And I see this repeating, and it's almost like an OCD thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
So
So
let me
I'm seeing this. I'm not, and I'm trying to grapple. So that's what, yeah, that's what,
Does
there's this
that
thing of
happen?
wanting to get away from it. And
Yeah.
also, how do I actually finally manage to be here and be effective still?
Okay, so that's where I was going to go, because without having to know the content of it, I just have a real visceral sense of that I want to bring you down into your heart, out of your head, and just see what that's like. What do you, if you just bring yourself here in your hand, yeah, your hand will help. Just bring yourself here, breathe, and just notice what your heart is holding. You can tell us or not tell us,
I hold a lot of sadness and grief, and it's
there's a lot of
almost always there.
Yeah, yeah,
Always, almost. Yeah.
yeah.
And the challenge comes sometimes I can connect to my heart,
Mhm.
but in a lot of these things that I have to do, and I have to also connect to the mind. I need that manager to function, and that's,
Yeah.
and then I just want to
So
go.
let me just say, I want to activate not the manager, but the discerning part of your heart. And so I think that the manager has been trying to make decisions without your heart's wisdom in place. And I don't know in a kind of immediate way how to bring you there, except to talk about it, to just to mention it, that there is something right here that discerns your path. It's also your belly. If you want to use the other hand on the belly, my experience is that there is an intelligence in the belly that knows the step to take. It's not in the head. And it needs to be done in cooperation with, I was going to say cahoots with the heart, but it's kind of a kind of discernment that requires that you be embodied here and here, and that takes some settling. And the OCD gets you back up in your head, and should I do that? Should I do that? Should I do that? Should I do that? And pretty soon you're confused and it's all kind of spinning. So that's, I really felt like I wanted to just have you spend some time here. And it might be that there isn't a sense immediately that comes of what to do. But if you just hang out here with inquiry of like, what do I know in my belly and my heart? What am I being drawn to and why? And, if you even can do that a little bit with somebody else present, that can help you hold the space for your own heart and your belly. Oddly enough, we often need somebody else to help us hold space for our own heart and belly to actually hear what's there. And to bring you, there's the fretting, and you can almost feel that energy kind of come up here. And the answer just isn't up here.
So what happens, because I find myself in this place actually a lot with myself, because there's often not someone else there to hold it.
That's how to help you hold it.
Is that's partly when I don't want to do anything or go anywhere. And then, and yet I know, and so for little periods of time, that is good. There's a rest, there's a coming to.
Yeah.
But then I lose it
So
as soon as I have to start.
If you are lovingly present with it, there's a part of you that doesn't want to go anywhere and doesn't want to do anything. Can you be lovingly present with that without blending with it?
Without what?
Blending with it. In other words, just collapsing into that part of you that doesn't want to do anything. Because I sense that that's not what needs to happen here. No.
And I know that's what I really want to be able is to make these decisions and be in the world and know my want and activate the part to make it happen rather than just go into this sort of more protective, because this feels like it is a connection to my soul, myself, but it's also a protective.
Yeah. So maybe it would be less protective if you held your hands away from your heart, because it's not necessarily the protection that I'm looking for. It's the energy connection between this and your heart that I'm kind of wanting the energy to come down out of your head, settle here, settle in the belly, and bring presence to some of these emotional energies, a discerning presence with these emotional energies. So this is about as far as I can take you right now, Allison, but maybe I, just keep coming down, settling, listening. And, if you have someone who can kind of hold space a little bit with that, as you're discerning, there's some sort of decision that needs to be made. To have someone help you hold space for what you know here, which isn't, just
like when I'm dancing or something, I can get into that, but it's like I have very practically have to make a decision on home on moving.
Yeah.
And that is where,
Yeah.
how do I do that? So there are pros and cons. There is head stuff that has to go on.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
And so that's what I'm struggling. So I'd love to find someone who could help me tune into the resolution, the discernment of all these list things.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
If luck is what it takes, I wish you good luck. Good discernment.
Thank you.
Good integrated discernment. All right. So we're going to need to close up here. So everybody keep noticing your experience. And come and tell me what you're noticing. Right. Be well. Take care.